voters. In our country, at any given point of time, there are either preparations going on for elections, strategizing, planning, campaigning, or there are actually elections being held and votes being counted. It's a perennial cycle in the world's biggest democracy. From elections for the parliament to state elections to by-polls then for some of the seats in both of these, to civic body polls. It's literally a constant cycle. Can you imagine, voters, the amount of resources it needs? Can you imagine the amount of time it takes? And it takes away from those who are elected to do some work and to serve this country. And so of late, especially in the last year and a half, we've seen a lot of chatter about simultaneous elections, or one India, one poll, as some call it. What does this really mean? It means that all the elections that have to be held from the state to the center to the local maybe are held at the same time. There are two camps. One side says this will help us save on resources, on money, on time, so that the elected representatives can for the rest of the 5 years only focus on governance. The other side says, no, you cannot do that because there is a security issue, a huge burden on the security forces. You cannot do it because the issues are different for civic body, for local assembly elections, or for central elections. The issues are different and you cannot confuse the voter. And what happens when the government falls halfway through the term? How do you decide these things? And then, of course, there are politics. The BJP wants simultaneous elections, has been pushing for it. Some in the opposition just call it simply a ploy by the BJP. Tonight we are going to ask very simple questions. How can this really happen in a country that is constantly in a cycle of elections? How do we ensure that we come to one common cycle for all? Why does only BJP want it so much and not the others? Why does Congress oppose it? But more importantly, the actual question that matters to you, what's in it for the voter? That's the big conversation tonight.
As the countdown for Battle 2019 begins, BJP President Amit Shah has batted for holding Lok Sabha and Assembly polls together, saying it would check expenditure and ensure that the nation is not in election mode throughout the year. Amit Shah, in a letter to the Law Commission, has stated that holding simultaneous polls is not only a concept, but a principle which can be implemented. He also reiterated that simultaneous polls would strengthen the federal structure of the country.
The idea of simultaneous election, which I describe as mother of all political reforms, to be given a chance.
The law panel examining the feasibility of holding simultaneous polls had sought views of political parties before finalizing its report.
Neither the Law Commission nor the Election Commission can decide upon simultaneous elections. Here, our party and several other parties, including Congress, have made it clear it is not possible.
Most of the opposition parties have opposed this idea, claiming that it is against the federal structure of the country. While politics continues over the big idea, tonight we ask, are simultaneous polls really going to benefit voters? The debate begins now.
Before we go across to our panelists, let's get in a big voice, an expert voice in, former CEC, Mr. Krishnamurthy, T.S. Krishnamurthy, joining us on the phone line. Mr. Krishnamurthy, thank you for speaking to the viewers of Mirror Now. And we're very interested to know, where do you stand on this issue of holding simultaneous elections in India?
Well, I think I have more than once expressed the view that considering the current political conditions in this country, simultaneous poll is useful in the interest of the country. But if the election reforms which have been proposed for quite some time have been implemented, and if we can ensure that free and fair elections without money and muscle power, etc., if we can ensure that, there may not be any need for simultaneous polls because the purpose of simultaneous poll is to save on time, resources, and hatred and violence. If that can be avoided, simultaneous polls may not be necessary. But under the present circumstances, simultaneous poll will have some benefit in the interest of the nation. But that would require a constitutional amendment. Whether it is possible or not depends upon the conditions within the parliament and the political parties. If there is a consensus and if there is an amendment providing for fixed tenure of the House, simultaneous polls is certainly not possible, is certainly possible and is also desirable.
Mr. Krishnamurthy, you say if there is a provision involved for a fixed tenure of the House. Many viewers are asking the question tonight. In fact, just as you were speaking, I was reading some of the comments. They are saying what happens if, halfway through the term the government falls? What happens then?
That's what I said. The fixed tenure, how do you ensure that? First thing is that if there is a vote of confidence, it does not, even if the vote of confidence is gone through successfully, it is not complete and effective unless and until a new leader is elected. So you have to ensure that provision in the Constitution, because we are following the Westminster style, where when once the vote of confidence is carried through, the House has to be dissolved, unless and until there is an alternative. But if you provide by law or by the constitutional amendment that the mere vote of no confidence will not dissolve the House, and the vote of no confidence can become effective only if an alternate leader is elected. If that is so, it is possible.
Mr. Krishnamurthy, what do you think of the idea that has also been suggested by some in the Election Commission right now, which is to say, how about annual elections? How about once each year, maybe in November or any other month, once each year, whatever are the pending elections of that year, they're all held together. Is that a more practical solution?
More practical in the sense that it only requires a small amendment in the Representation of People's Act. There is no need for a constitutional amendment. It is possible and it is easily implementable, no doubt about it.
I appreciate you speaking with the viewers of Mirror Now. Thank you. T.S. Krishnamurthy there, former Chief Election Commissioner, sharing his views on this reform that is being much debated. Let's go across to our other panelists who are joining us this evening. Professor Jagdeep Chokar, founder of the Association for Democratic Reforms. I've got Kailash Vastev, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court. Good evening to you. Jayaprakash Narayanan, founder of Lok Sakta. Rajiv Pandey, leader of the BJP. Suleiman Khan, spokesperson for the Congress Party. Let's go across to the BJP representative because the issue has come back to limelight today with Amit Shah writing to the Law Commission. Now, why is it that the BJP feels so strongly about it, Mr. Pandey?
Because BJP thinks that the whole machinery is always gearing up for the elections and that deflect the idea of development. And in your opening remarks, you said that most of the opposition parties are against the one nation, one poll. I think that is not the correct fact because from the opposition party, Samajwadi Party, Telangana Rashtra Samiti, AIDMK, BJD, everybody is supporting. Only the smaller parties like AIM, AIDUF, CPI, CPM, in the bigger party DMK, TDP and Congress is talking about there should be no one nation, one poll election. The basic issue is that the election code of conduct is put, so in that time you can't do developmental works. In one state election is happening and then if something happens on the social media that is violation of the election code of conduct. So many good things are there and this is an idea. Two successive presidents have supported this idea. This concept was accepted by even the Congress when, under the leadership of Congress MP by the standing committee. This is not any party's issue. We can reduce the expenditure. You cannot have election all the time if one nation, one poll. So I think massive expenditure can be cut down. And the biggest part is that there will be no election code of conduct in every 2-3 months here and there. And that will reduce that kind of embargo and that can speed up the development. Third thing, what is my personal view, that if one election, one nation, one poll is there, then the politicians will not do always politics for the vote bank. Once election is done, and we know very well that now in 24 after Modi ji will win in 2019 and then election will happen in 2024, then the political parties will behave like a constructive opposition.
Right.
Not because they are thinking, oh my God, it will fall down, and I will become. Rahul Gandhi ji is always must be thinking, oh my God, government will fall, and then I will become prime minister. That situation should not happen. That will reduce the uncertainty, and I think it will be very good for the nation.
Okay,
and this is not
so let me
say
this. So this is what the BJP is telling us right now, that this is also going to be beneficial for the nation and for the voters, because you won't be in a perennial cycle of election, and so elected representatives will get time to do governance. So you won't see Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath running from Gujarat to Karnataka to Kerala, and all this while he could actually be focusing on governance work and what's happening in Varanasi and Gorakhpur in Uttar Pradesh, and that's the idea that he, largely. So Sulaiman Khan, what's the problem with that?
Why you are targeting Yogi ji on this subject?
I'm not targeting anyone. I was just giving an example to illustrate the point that you made. You made the same point. You made the same point, Mr. Pandey. I just illustrated it with an example. You illustrated it with one example as well. Let's move on. Let's not get derailed by that.
Don't make it a BJP Congress issue. Yeah, I am saying the same thing. Let us discuss the subject.
Sulaiman Khan, please.
You know, may I please start? You know, this idea of simultaneous elections by the BJP and more categorically by Mr. Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister, I think it's constitutional perversity and it's preposterous. The reason why I am saying so, because it hits at the very core of the democracy. It's antithesis of the democracy, because it actually denies the right of the general people to exercise their right to vote or to live in a constitutional democracy. Why I am saying so? Because why I am saying so? Because just assume for a moment that for doing so, you have to dissolve all the... Don't laugh, please. We are not in some comedy show. Just relax. So why I am saying so? Because to do this in 2019, you have to dissolve all the assemblies. A number of assemblies are halfway their tenure, 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years. So the people who have elected a government, it will be a betrayal to their trust which they have, you know, for which they have elected the government for 5 years. One. Second, even if they have a simultaneous poll and because of alliance, complications, a number of times governments will fall in between. And then in that case, governor's rule will be implemented in that state and the assembly will be put in suspended animation. Third, it will be more preposterous for the reason if the central government falls, then the central government will be run by the president's rule. And you know, then a group of people will actually run the government and it will be actually tyranny of the unelected. Fourth, what I was saying, one reason which Mr. Modi has given and BJP people are giving, that a lot of money is being spent, there are administrative hurdles being caused because of elections, because of code of conduct. You know, there is a report of select committee of the parliament or a standing committee of the parliament which says that a total expenditure of the Lok Sabha and the assembly elections, all assemblies, is 4,600 crores. They should remember Mr. Modi has spent some 5,000 crores on advertisements and marketing of the central government, on his own advertisement of his own government. So people who are saying that it will save a lot of money, they have already spent some 5,000 crores on their advertisements. And about administrative hurdles, even when the assemblies, the governments in which will fall because of alliance complications, then also there will be administrative hurdles for 2 years or 3 years whenever there will be a governor's rule.
Okay, so 2 points.
Nobody elected representative will not govern the rule.
Let's take a couple of those points. Let's take a couple of those points.
Is the debate, last point, is the debate purely academic or a BJP has a roadmap for this?
30-second interjection is required.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Pandey, quickly, 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Only 30 seconds. What he is talking, that 5,000 rupees expenditure was done to do advertisement. This is such a silly argument. All the programs which benefit the poor of this country was advertised, like Ujjwala Yojana, Saubhagyavati Yojana.
Why do you need to advertise?
Insurance scheme.
So why do you need to advertise? Why to spend so much of money?
Did not speak.
The question is this, what I am
saying. When you were
saying.
speaking, I did not speak.
If you are doing
Allow me
good
to
work,
complete.
why
Okay,
you
no,
have spent 5,000 crores in 4 years?
To the
It is
Congress
people's
and
money.
the BJP, this is
You
not the
cannot
debate
say that we
about
want to save money and
4,800
spend
crore
5,000 crores
ad
on advertisements.
expenditure bill of the government.
This
The
is
day we
sad.
have that conversation, I will
Can
for
we-
sure call both of you. I'm
Madam,
going
this
to
is
go
very
and move
sad.
on, sir. We are
Why
talking
he is
about a
not bringing
very
that
No, it is
debate?
important.
other very
What kind of
important
People
topic
who are,
tonight.
giving
Let's stick to the
slogans
topic
of
for the
saving
night.
money, they'll
We will
spend
have this
5,000 crores
conversation
on fake
another day,
publicity.
Suleiman Khan.
Thank
That's
you.
not the point. Yes. Kailash
Thanks a lot.
Vasdev, to
Thanks
the
a
two
lot.
No, it is one of the
points that have
argument.
been raised by the
BJP people
Congress
are saying it
spokesperson.
is saving a lot of money.
Can
Therefore,
I
it is
please
important.
move on? Congress and the BJP, can the representatives allow me to move on to
No,
Kailash
don't bring
Vasdev?
BJP into the same things. Don't bracket
Now, one
us
of
with
the
BJP.
crucial issues
Congress.
is
Please.
how do you tell the voter who just 2 years ago cast his vote and made a choice, or just 1 year ago made a choice for who should run the government for them? How do you tell the same voter that you will have to do so again and that your elected representative will not get the 5 years? That's one of the points that Congress has raised. The second is, what do you do if a government falls halfway through, which is a question I've also been asking, and if you put in President's rule or if you suspend the assembly for 2 years, is that fair for the people of that state? Mr. Vasdev.
Look, we have a fascinating constitution. The constitution accepts the federal structure. In the federal structure, you have the government of India and you have the state governments. The state governments, and in the states, you have political parties, you have a central political party like the Congress, you have a major party like the BJP, you have two major parties of this kind, but you also have small electoral parties like the TMC, you have the AIADMK, you have all sorts of small parties. In 1977, when the Janata government succeeded in coming to power under Morarji Desai, Mr. Charan Singh, as the Home Minister, wrote a letter to all states saying that, look, in the center, we have come up with a total thumping majority, so we must call for elections in the states, and the states must be asked to come in line with what has been happening at the center. A suit was filed with the state of Rajasthan, actually 6 states, and a several set of writ petitions were filed in the Supreme Court, saying that this instruction by the Home Minister is unconstitutional. The Supreme Court examined the recommendations made by the Home Minister, dismissed the suits, and in one sense upheld the request of the Home Minister that you should have simultaneous polls or polls to be held after the central government had changed. 3 questions arise in these circumstances. A, do you have the power to dissolve an assembly without any cause under Article 356? 356 says presidential proclamation. You have governments which have just been elected. You have governments which have terms to go in the states. Second, you have a situation where there's a central government which is heading for an election, asking for all elections to be held simultaneously. I'll come to that issue later. The third issue which arises is, what kind of power do you exercise under Article 356? What are the powers of the Election Commission? The terms of our assembly are fixed 5 years. You cannot reduce it. You cannot increase it, save and except in very emergent circumstances. You can remove a state government on the recommendations of the governor, who is a representative of the center. It has been held in Bomai in a whole host of cases. Now, coming back to the suggestion made, whether you should have polls in the states and the center simultaneously. It's a very good suggestion, because in the long term, you will be able to have a governing system where there will be no fractures between the center and the state, assuming the same party wins. Assuming there's a divided house, you will maintain what is happening today. One party pulls one side, the other pulls the other side. There is a lot of mudslinging between the political parties, and the consequence is a division between governments, grants, monies, etc. Now, if you are to have an election in all the whole country at the same time, with center or state, you must make sure that all the state assemblies are to be dissolving at the same time. You cannot extend the term of the central government because 5 years are coming to an end next year. You cannot reduce the length or the tenure of the state governments because they have got tenures exceeding 2 years. Hence, today what must be done is a political decision must be taken. A full consultation should take place, that election should be held at a point of time when most of the assemblies are dissolving or coming to an end. Till you don't have that, you cannot have a situation where the elections will be the same at the same time in the entire country. It is not possible. It is a great thing to have because it saves costs, it saves expenses. You have an opportunity of having a common system of governance. But in our system, where elections have taken place at different times, governments collapse, etc., I don't think it is going to be possible, save except by a very powerful exercise of 356, which will be held to be mala fide, especially after the Supreme Court has said so. You had the instance in Jharkhand recently, in Uttarakhand, you had the instance in Arunachal. All those governments have come back to power.
Yes.
So personally speaking, it's a utopian thought, which will be very difficult to implement, excepting for inviting a lot of flack by the government in power.
Okay. Thank you for that. Let me take that point across to Jayaprakash Narayan and ask him, do you agree, Mr. Narayan, good evening to you, that it's a great concept, theoretically speaking, but when it comes to implementing it, especially to begin with, it's a little tricky.
The implementation of political decisions
either.
In a polity like ours.
Mr. Vasudev, I was just going to take that question across to JP Narayan.
No, I'm giving you an example. Take for example Nagaland. Take for example Meghalaya. Take for example Tamil Nadu. Take for example Bengal. You take for example Odisha. Now these are all different political parties in the states elected by the people to represent them.
Yes.
Kashmir, we've had a division, that's a different matter, but other states you have political parties of a smaller size. Can you keep them out of the national polity? You see, that's the flip side of it, because representation of the people, by the people, for the people is the principle of democracy.
Absolutely.
How can you keep these small political parties out?
Absolutely, I agree with you, Mr. Vasudev, and which is why I wanted to take that point across to JP Narayan and ask him his view. And then does it make sense to maybe just have elections annually once a year and combine everything which is in that time zone to once a year?
No,
you must have an occasion to
sound idea in principle.
You must get the elections at the same time.
This reflects. May I please?
Yes, yes. My question is to JP Narayan, please. Yes, go ahead.
No, I'm not sure it's a sound idea in the first place, because this represents nothing but an electoral fatigue among the middle classes, the media, and the political parties. Not any sound judgment as to what will happen to the governance of India and the people of India as a consequence of this proposal going through. There is no evidence of any improvement on account of simultaneous elections. We've had simultaneous elections earlier. We have them in Andhra Pradesh, in Telangana, and Odisha, and recently in Karnataka. There is absolutely no difference in the quality of governance on account of simultaneous elections in these states, as opposed to staggered elections in other states. Therefore, to me, it's making a mountain out of a molehill. A small proposal, at best for administrative convenience, elevated to a grand principle, and a huge debate is generated. Voters have not shown any distinction between assembly vote and parliament vote in this country. There's only one exception so far. In Karnataka, when Ramakrishna Hegde government was defeated, or at least his party's candidates were defeated in the parliamentary election when Indira Gandhi was assassinated, then Hegde went for assembly polls. 3 months later, in the assembly, Hegde's party, Janata, won a resounding victory. That's the only occasion that took 3 months apart when the people distinguished between assembly and parliament. Otherwise, the vote in this country in a broad sense tends to be either for or against the government in power in the state. In this context, this notion that simultaneous election automatically improve governance is really not borne by evidence. There are two approaches to any kind of large political re-engineering in the country. One approach is strengthen federalism, alter the incentives in politics, and therefore improve governance. The other approach is look at administrative convenience and promote more centralization and uniformity, and promote status quo, preserve status quo. The proposal as conceived here does not alter any incentives. For instance, the marginal vote continues to be as important as before in the first past the post system. Therefore, vote buying will continue, except that there will be one-time wholesale vote buying. There will be no change in the pattern of vote buying. Freebies will continue, because you haven't really altered the nature of politics. And the honesty in government is no longer compatible with survival in office in this country in our kind of Westminster model. That will continue. But if you are looking at the whole thing and want to alter the political incentives, strengthen the states and local governments, and see that this kind of dependence on the legislators, dependence on marginal vote, dependence on local satraps, dependence on money power for voting, if that is to be changed by an altered electoral system, then it's worthwhile considering. Otherwise, proposal as conceived now is a very minor proposal given a maximal importance.
But there is some value to the argument, Mr. Narayanan.
To the people.
But there is some value to the argument that our elected representatives, our netas, are spending way too much time just strategizing for elections with seat selection and then campaigning and you know, all of the time and energy that goes into this, and that's from top to the bottom, and that is a problem. There has to be some solution to that as well. Otherwise, you're just jumping on a plane from one state to the other, just constantly in a campaign mode.
The issue is how much of political capital have invested in a change. What is the outcome that is desirable that has happened? Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Odisha, earlier Karnataka, please tell me, in what way are they radically different from the governance of the rest of the country? Nobody doubts the intentions, but just because I have good intentions, a bad proposal will not become a sound proposal.
Okay, fair enough. Point taken. Professor Chokar, good evening to you. The big question tonight is, what is in this for the voter? As a voter, do I stand to benefit or do I stand to lose if we have a system where elections are held all at once together, either once in a year or once in 5 years?
Before I answer that question, whether the voter stands to gain or lose, I am completely at a loss to understand what is the problem that is attempted to be solved. If the problem, as you articulated, is that the political leaders spend time campaigning and they don't do any work, if that is the problem, then is cutting down the number of elections the solution, or is making the political leaders do their official work the solution? When somebody becomes a minister or a prime minister or a chief minister, they take a constitutional oath which says that they will perform the duties of their job to the best of their ability in the next 5 years. Now, my contention is that when a chief minister or a prime minister or a minister overlooks or ignores his or her responsibilities which he or she has undertaken under the oath of the Constitution, they are committing a breach of that oath. Why is it that the same 20, 30, 40 people have to campaign in every nook and corner of the country? There is supposed to be a government and there is supposed to be a party. If people are such that they are absolutely needed for campaigning, they should not be made ministers. There are enough people in every party.
Professor Chokar, then you're talking again, it's in an idealist world, and you're talking about ethics of politics which obviously don't exist. There is no legal way to stop them, is there?
No, though I think if a minister violates his or her oath of taken under the Constitution, that person should be prosecuted for violating the oath. I mean, is there a law in this land or not? Because, I mean, the other argument being given is that a lot of money will be saved and this money will go into development. Are elections and development antithesis of each other? Elections are the prime method of implementing democracy. Are we looking for the cheapest possible democracy? Is that the aim that the country is trying to achieve? Or are we looking for the most robust and most efficient and the best democracy?
So let me ask that question.
We have money to do all kinds of other stuff.
Yes.
We have no money. No, and then somebody said, the election commission has said that they spent 4,500 crores on elections.
Yes.
Now that money is a drop in the ocean as compared to the money that political parties and candidates spend.
Yes.
The real money is spent there. Nobody is talking about that. Then we say model code of conduct is in operation, therefore all development work stops. Model code of conduct does not say anywhere that all development work should stop. The development works that are going on are expected to continue, and they do continue. All the Model Code of Conduct says is that if you think of a new
you can't announce a new project
introduced,
yes,
and if that scheme, no, you can announce. If there is a possibility of the scheme influencing the result of the election, then you have to seek Election Commission's permission. And very often I know instances where Election Commission has given permission. But the problem is, for 4.5 years, our so-called elected representatives and governments don't do anything. And all the new thing they think is in the last 3 months of their tenure.
Okay.
This is not the problem with the Model Code of Conduct is imposed in, Model Code of Conduct is imposed in Tripura. Why should the development stop in Kerala or in Madhya Pradesh? This is all a bogey. I will tell you what the problem is. The problem that is attempted to be solved is that we want to move from a parliamentary system to a presidential system. And we want to move through it surreptitiously without head-on amending the constitution. I have no problem in a presidential form of government, but let us say that and amend the constitution to that effect. Let us not try and do that through the back door and giving all kinds of facetious arguments which have no meaning.
Okay, let me take some of your points and take them back to Mr. Pandey,
lastly,
because it's his party that's pushing it. Mr. Chokar, I'll come back to you. Mr. Pandey, there are 3 panelists here who say that the amount that you're talking in terms of saving money, even if it is 5,000 crore, is not such a big amount. You have to think about the larger picture of democracy and the value of a person's vote, even if it is one person who's decided to cast his vote and and vote for somebody specific. You can't turn around and tell them, we have now decided to change the format and your vote doesn't count right now.
Who is doing that? I am unable to understand the argument that by doing this, that robust democracy it will not be a robust economy, democracy. The basic issue is that in 5 years you have to have election in the state, and in 5 years you have to have election.
I'll give you an example what they mean. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. No, 1 minute. You said you are unable to understand. Let me try and explain this to you. Let me try and explain this to you. What happens to the voters of, if you decide in 2019, for example, theoretically speaking, if you decide that in 2019 you have simultaneous elections, what happens to the voters of Karnataka who just chose their new government few months ago? What happens to the voters of Tamil Nadu who chose their government in 2016 and that government has a significant term to go? Similarly, what happens to the voters of West Bengal who still have 2.5 years of the existing government? No, you said you don't understand, so I was illustrating. Go ahead, please.
No, I am coming to that point. You are not allowing me to complete. The problem is this. I am coming to that point. You see, the basic issue is that if again election happens, suppose in Karnataka again it happens, then the government who has won, it is only for one time this exercise has to happen. In Karnataka, suppose election again takes place, the party who has support, they will again win. It doesn't make any difference. And second point, if it is going with the center election, that will affect the state election is another bogey by the people who are opposing this. In 2014, when Modi ji popularity was so high and it is going on in 2019, it will be better than that. But that did not affect the voter of Bengal.
What if an elected government loses vote of confidence? What if an elected party loses vote of confidence in the assembly?
Tanvi, if you have decided, Tanvi, if you have decided to cut me in every statement,
I'm not cutting you. I got your point. I moved on to the next point.
No, you are cutting. No, these arguments have no merit, which is done by all 3 panelists. I am saying this. You know, election, if finally they will select the government. If in Karnataka, suppose tomorrow election happens in 2019, the Congress party, if they have popular support, they will become chief minister, their party or JDS. How democracy is under danger if one poll,
if Congress and JDS tomorrow decide that this is not working, if the JDS government becomes a minority government tomorrow, Mr. Pandey, but we are in a simultaneous election cycle, so we have to wait 3 more years to get them a new government, What's the solution there?
Yes.
We're just trying to understand. What's the solution there?
Yes, I am coming. Yeah, I am giving you the reply. I am replying. You see, this whole thing is an idea. It has to be a constitutional amendment. The debate has to happen. We have to reach some consensus that what will happen, the situation you have said. Right now, it is at a stage of forming an idea. But the people who are not discussing this subject and just opposing this idea, that's what I am saying. You know, it is now Parliament will discuss this issue because it requires a constitutional amendment. Amendment in People's Representation Act, you have a valid point. So there somebody are suggesting let us have 2.5 years. What will happen? Finally, everything will have some idea. There can be a fixed term. That kind of things are being discussed. So let us wait for that.
Suleiman Khan, what's up for discussion? What will your response be if this comes to the Parliament?
I'll again say that it'll hit at the core of the concept of federalism, which is actually ingrained in our constitution. It will decimate federalism, and a multi-party democracy will also be endangered by this. And an autocratic and an authoritarian rule will come in this way. And as Mr. Kailash Vasudev has very well enunciated 2 or 3 points, in which one of the point is, how will you dissolve the assembly? The only powers which the central government has to dissolve the assembly are under Article 356. That is emergency provision. And the central government cannot dissolve the state assembly other than having an emergent situation, like as described in Article 356. So what will be the reason to dissolve so many assemblies? And you are again and again putting this question that if an assembly which has completed 2 years term, if the government falls, JDS, like in Karnataka or in any other state where there is a coalition government, one of the party, they are not going along well and the government falls, then for 3 years there will be a governor's rule. So all these things, BJP is unable to answer on that. They have no justification. They are not able to explain that for 3 years or 2 years or 2.5 years, whenever there is no government, elected government, how will the state function?
Mr. Pandey wants to try and explain to you right now
how the country's policies and everything will be made.
Mr. Pandey wants to try and explain it to you right now. Let's listen.
Okay.
What as a lawyer, as rightly Vasudev ji has said, that what will be the way? It will be under suspended animation for some time. And if this kind of one nation, one poll is followed, then maybe the politicians will behave more responsibly. They cannot join hands at the election time. You are abusing each other.
Oh my goodness. So the assembly will put in suspended animation. That's what I am saying.
Congress used to say JDS is a chore, and after that both join hands. So they may behave more responsibly. You cannot do
and
this.
And you used to say in Kashmir that Mehbooba Mufti stand with Afzal Guru, and you formed a government with PDP and Mehbooba Mufti.
This guy is in the habit of
with sympathizers of Afzal Guru.
Why this guy is interfering when he speaks? I do not speak, Tanvi ji. This is very sad.
If the assembly is in suspended animation, please reply to
this.
that.
Are you saying that the BJP, Mr. Pandey, are you saying BJP was irresponsible when it got into an alliance with the PDP?
Not at all. I didn't say this. I did not say this. You are putting words in my mouth.
But you walked out of the alliance halfway through the term.
JDS, I said the same thing. Yes. So there
for
may be a new government.
Years,
who knows?
They were with the PDP.
The people will have to behave. There may be a new government.
So point being, bottom line here is, Mr. Pandey, you can't expect politicians to act responsibly. If that was going to happen, we wouldn't have so many problems already. If politicians were going to act responsibly,
it's all imagination.
They wouldn't have gone.
Actually.
They won't be on a spree campaigning across the country rather than focusing on the governance that they should be doing in their own states.
You will not understand.
This is a matter of the idea.
Idealist, so you will not understand.
I have a senior lawyer. I have a senior lawyer. I have a person, a founder of ADR who speaks for electoral reforms and the voice of the people. I have a founder of a political party who believes in bringing in more reforms. But if you want to sit here and dismiss everybody, I think you need to come up with better arguments,
Mr.
Pandey.
Modi
Kailash
and
Vasudev
the people
wanted
from
to come
BJP
in.
understand everything.
Kailash Vasudev and then JP Narayanan, please. Kailash Vasudev first.
Kailash Vasudevji has said rightly everything. I am not dismissing his.
Okay.
I am dismissing Congress and that one organization who is not talking anything. I am accepting all argument of Kailash ji.
Okay. Kailash Vasudev.
I wanted to come in for a different purpose. In our system today, we don't have mature politicians. We call each other irresponsible. We have all sorts of epitaphs, all sorts of statements. We were just told, Mr. Pandey said, we'll have more responsible politicians. If we had more responsible politicians, we wouldn't be facing the situations we face today. Look at our history. 50 we got independence, 50 we formed our own governments. 50 to 55 was supposed to be the first elections. Between 65 and date, we've had so many dissolution of state assemblies. They've been matters of great debate. Supreme Court in Bomai laid down the parameters when you could dissolve a state assembly. After the Supreme Court judgment in '94, things have changed. That absolutism in the that absolute power exercised by the governor to dissolve an assembly has come to an halt. When it happened, there was a price paid. I gave you the example of Uttarakhand. I gave you the example of Arunachal. You keep all this at the back of your mind. Today, if you're going to have a political system in which all states are going to have assemblies, all state assemblies in the union are going to have assemblies on the same points of time, you have broken the chain which should have continued when the Constitution envisaged it. For political considerations, you dissolve a state assembly, saying, I'm in power, I'll try and come in there. You dissolve, when the central government is dissolved, it happened after Mr. Morarji Desai's government collapsed. It happened after Mrs. Gandhi's collapsed at one point of time. It happened in the 1990s. Chandrasekhar's government came, Gujarat's government came, Dev Gowda's government came. Why wasn't all this taken into consideration at that point of time? You see, in the political system which we have, it is necessary that there be a representation. The reason I wanted to come in basically at that point of time was, why are we talking about weighing democracy in terms of money? An election costs 4,200 crores, 5,500 crores or whatever. Is that the price of our democracy? The price of our democracy is the freedom which we cherish under our constitution. Do not weigh our constitution, do not weigh our terms of freedom in terms of money. That is one part. Second, how are you going to possibly implement this utopic decision? You do not have the wherewithal. You have a lot of constitutional restraints. You have a lot of situations that will come into play. I gave you the example. Odisha has a different government. Tamil Nadu has a different government. The Andhra Pradesh state has a different government. The different political parties. Bengal has a different political party. How are you going to balance all this in a system which is now federally controlled? Federal control comes in, like in the US. You have two political parties, Democrats.
Government, they are supporting one nation, one poll. Sir, all the parties who are ruling in Tamil, in
they're not
Andhra
supporting. Please.
Telangana, DMK.
No. Wait.
BJD has supported. TDP.
Wait.
Sir, TRS is supporting. AIDMK is supporting.
You may claim to have support. You may have claimed to have support. That's a different matter. I'm speaking of elections per se. These parties are there. They will support you because that is the purpose of politics. You've got to go on. No one stops that. But can you possibly enforce a situation where all the elections will be simultaneous? It is utopian. It is not going to happen. What you should do is think in the long term. Think of trying to reduce the term of the central government if you have the guts. Have them at the point of time when 10, 15 states are ready for it. Now, Rajasthan is getting ready for elections. Your central government is not ready for elections. Your technically central government terms will come in April or May. Rajasthan is going to come in much earlier. Other states are going to come in much earlier. Can you combine the lot together? Do you want to have a snap poll in the center so that you will be at 7, 8, 10 states in the center come in together?
Right.
Will that be a political decision?
Right.
Will that be a decision which anyone can take? It's a very fluid situation.
I agree with you, Mr. Vasudev. I couldn't agree with you more. That's the exact.
How one nation, one poll can destroy the democracy? Reply me this one question. How one nation, one poll is going to affect our democracy?
That's exactly what he just did, Mr. Pandey. He exactly explained to you how in a democratic setup it doesn't make, it isn't right to take away that right of the voter for a set up government, for an elected government to put them out of term. I am running out of time.
It's only for one time. Later on it will be done.
who are on the phone line. No, it is also about every time that a government falls halfway through the term or before its due term is over, and then they have to wait for the cycle to end. That's also not fair to the voters, I believe so. I have got Kamal on the phone line from Kolkata. Good evening, Kamal. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Tanvi. I was listening to this very, very interesting debate, Tanvi. And
Go ahead, yes.
Yeah. So my comment really is, as a voter, I speak as a voter, and my comment is that there is nothing wrong with either the existing system or what is proposed. And that's the truth about it. Basically, it's like people who say that we need new laws to improve the nation and all that. Laws exist. I think the problem that I see as a voter is that the intent is very, very surreptitious. And I agree fully with Professor and with Kailash ji and with Jayaprakash ji that there is no problem with either the existing system or anything that is proposed. I think the problem is with the lack of honest intent. And, that's the truth of it. And we can see it as voters, we can see it. We may be powerless to do anything about it, but that's the truth.
Well, you definitely you can definitely get your point across to the representatives, Kamal, and that's the point of having these conversations and having you all share your opinion on it. Quickly going across to Radhika on the phone line from Mumbai. Good evening, Radhika.
Good evening, Tanvi. I'd like to first of all thank the Professor and Mr. Vasudev, Professor Choka and Mr. Vasudev for having given everybody watching the show perspective on constitutional law. And thank you for saying, sir, that, our freedom of franchise cannot be measured in terms of money. I can't tell you how good it feels to hear that. Now, breach of protocol is something that is not new to this government. This dispensation has, over the last 4 years, repeatedly breached, standards of protocol in governance. And I would not like to mention them because it will make the BJP representative blush. But having said that, I'd like to ask him, why should you presume that it is okay for the educated citizens of this country to sit back and watch while you, breach constitutional law and reduce the term of a state government just because, in your opinion, it makes sense to, have polls simultaneously? I'm sorry, sir. I voted in a government for 5 years, and I would like to see my state government complete its term and fulfill, the mandate and the manifesto, the promises in the manifesto.
Right. Thank you so much, Radhika, for sharing your views. I'm running out of time, but I needed to go across to Mr. JP Narayanan and get in his last view. You've heard what the citizens had to say. I will come to you, Rajiv Pandey. Just hold on for that thought. But Mr. JP Narayanan wanted to come in earlier, so yes.
Tanvi, I will not talk about the legal and constitutional issues because that's been discussed adequately. The larger question is, does it change the nature of politics? Does it improve the quality of governance? Does it improve the service delivery for the ordinary citizen of this country and the taxpayer? Sorry. This whole proposal, the premise is that the fulcrum of politics in India is the parliament and the union government. Whereas everybody who has an understanding of politics knows that the unit of politics in India, unit of service delivery, is the state. At the end of the day, almost everything that's important for the citizen is decided at the state and local level. Whereas what we discuss in Parliament, or the issues about Parliament and union government, they're very nice for English-speaking people and the national channels. They're inconsequential for the lives of most of the people. Therefore, the real challenge is, how do you improve governance in states? If you don't look at an electoral system which is not necessarily a uniform and rigid one applicable to the whole country, but applies to the genius of each state, but without compromising the unity and integrity of India and common market, I don't think there's going to be any change in politics. We'll continue to complain about democracy and its failings.
Yes.
Look at Britain, a tiny country with one language, one culture mostly, one skin color. It has Parliament by our model, Westminster.
Yes.
The European Parliament, as long as it continues, by proportional representation. London City, direct election. The regional parliaments of Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, each has a different model, independent of the national model.
Right.
There's no reason why we should have one rigid model and then look at rigid election and this whole business of one nation, one vote.
Point taken. We started this premise. We started this debate by saying what's in it.
To alter the nature of politics.
We started this debate by saying what's in it for the voter. Frankly, after hearing all the expert views, I'm not able to see much. Yes, it's a great idea to say that you save so much on time and money and get everybody together at one go and put them to vote. But then the big question is what happens when the cycles fall out of sync? And it's happened in our country, viewers. We've seen it at least 4 times in the independent India's history where we were tempted to have simultaneous polls and then the cycles have fallen out of sync. And that is probably the problem nobody is able to address right now, because if you say that you put in President's rule and you wait till the next cycle of elections 2 years or 3 years later, then is that fair for the voters of that constituency? That's the big question. Completely out of time. Thank you so much to our panelists for joining us. The debate on this continues. What remains to be seen is to what extent is the BJP able to push this idea and get a consensus amongst all political parties.